Education itself can be traced all the way back to about 500 to 600 BC, as it is believed that Confucius was the first famous private educator. Up until the mid-19th century, educators didn't need an expansive degree and years of experience to teach, but throughout the years, education has become a way to inspire and prepare young minds for the future. The first public school in what would become the United States, the Boston Latin School, was established in 1635. It was a boys-only public secondary school. Educators back then didn't teach what we've come to know today as education. Instead, they taught about things like religion, community, and family values. Before the 1700s, private tutors were commonplace for students. However, this soon changed with the introduction of common schools, or one-room schoolhouses. Up until the early 19th century, most educators and schoolmasters were men. For most of these men, it wasn't their primary job. They were farmers who only taught in their off-seasons. For some of the educators, their position was thought of as temporary. They used their place as an educator to become more well-known by people in the community and form relationships that would then help them to find other jobs in law or the church, for example. But the 19th century brought with it many changes to the education system and the position of a teacher. A couple of the men who helped make the profession better were Horace Mann and Henry Barnard. They helped by making school systems in both Massachusetts and Connecticut better by advocating to increase educators' training and pay. And by the 1840s, educators were required to take a test before being allowed to teach in most states. Around the same time, the education in schools has switched to more academic subjects. In 1857, the National Education Association was founded. It became the largest labor union in the U.S., and it helped educators to fight for better conditions in the workplace. Nearing the end of the 19th century, it was becoming more commonplace for women to take a crack at teaching. One of women's biggest advocates in this endeavor was Catherine Beecher. She helped get women positions in education by arguing that women were actually much more qualified to work around things such as human development, and that teaching was an extension of being a mother. At the turn of the century, women educators were being scrutinized more and more in the workplace. They were being spread too thin, with sometimes up to 60 students per teacher. However, with the formation of unions and more women joining the workplace, they were eventually able to climb the metaphorical ladder of their profession and become administrators, a career path formerly reserved for men. For about 20 to 30 years, things had settled down within the teaching profession. However, African American teachers were still having issues. In 1954, there was a turning point that helped African American students as well as the teachers. The U.S. Supreme Court case, Brown v. Board of Education. The ruling was that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. This decision overruled a previous case, Plessy v. Ferguson, which had decided that separate but equal schools were constitutional. Teaching over the years has transformed from a simple educational function into a complex profession. Teaching helps develop the minds of children and young adults and prepare them for the future. It is a fast-growing profession and expected to continue growing for years to come.